Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. We'll start with our prayers as usual to seek permission from the Parampara to discuss spiritual subjects. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshuram Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sadarachatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam tam sajivam sadvaitam savadhutam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Please recite along with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Pankajanabhaya Nama Pankajamaline Nama Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajangrahe Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagaddhitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Anandram Prabhuji. Prabhuji, can you start your recording?
Oh, okay, Prabhu. Sorry, Prabhu. I thought somebody had started recording, Prabhu. On this computer?
Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. I'll just see anybody who else has joined. Hare Krishna Satyadev Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna Suma Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna Vanela Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Time and come out and spend some time in the morning on Sundays and Saturdays. We are doing this on a regular basis. We should continue to do this because this offers us an opportunity to be Krishna consciousness at least for some time. I am at least very grateful that I got this opportunity again. So I would like to thank Lilananda Prabhu, Arvind Prabhu, all the other senior devotees, who have been guiding us, guiding me also through this my Krishna consciousness journey. And this opportunity, as I mentioned last time, is an opportunity for me to be Krishna consciousness, in Krishna consciousness for at least around 90 minutes. Throughout the day, I might be thinking of other things. So morning, we do our chanting, and then we do whenever we are hearing something, hearing a lecture, or when we are doing our reading, at that time, we are paying some attention. But otherwise, apart from that, invariably, we are caught in the routine, in our material world, in our material lives. And perhaps one thing that we don't do is remember Krishna constantly, which is one of the, when Kapila Muni describes in this particular chapter, the Bhakti, it is about remembering Krishna constantly, keeping Krishna in the center constantly. So once again, thank you very much. And I'll start the lecture today, class today. I will keep it interactive. I will recite the verses and I will request the devotees to take turns to read the translation and the purports. We can spend some time to have a discussion. Yes, just 1 minute. Yeah, we can spend some time to have a discussion and we'll move on from there. Thank you very much. So we have completed 28 chapters of the third canto. The third canto itself is a vast canto that's covering very, very important topics. And we have completed 28 chapters. And now we move to chapter 29, wherein Lord Kapila will explain about devotional service to Mother Devavati. So today I will cover 20 verses and Mora Kinchan Prabhu will continue from there. And if you look at it, so essentially there are two sections here, which is one is Devavati's further questions. So Devavati continues to ask questions, and then she focuses on bhakti because she's very interested to know about bhakti. And then Kapila Muni, Lord Kapila describes the classes of bhakti first. He then goes on to describe the offenses in bhakti and its solution, and then the gradation in the jivas. So what are the different classes of the jivas, and then the very important topic on the nature of time. So before I start, I would like to ask recap of this. So from chapter 25 to 23, Lord Kapila will be imparting knowledge to Mother Devavati. And these are based on the 7 questions that Mother Devavati asks. The first question is, please dispel my illusion. In chapter 25, this question comes up. And the answers are again addressed there itself around Adhyatmika Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Bhakti. Superiority of Bhakti is also emphasized in in chapter 25, and it is re-emphasized out again once more in chapter 29. And what are the characteristics of a devotee? The second question was how can you attain bhakti to attain easily? How do you do it? So, and these are again described in chapter 25 itself, wherein bhakti beyond modes, bhava bhakti, if not qualified, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And Vaidhi sadhana bhakti is what we are as practitioners following. And eventually, once we had discussed that, and as we reach that stage of Nishtha, at that time, when we have that steadiness, that's when potentially we could move to the other side of bhakti. The third question was an inquiry around the process of jnana. And this was answered in chapter 26, where he describes Sankhya, characteristics of Prakriti, Purusha, and the elements, Karya Srishti, the Virat Rupa. And in chapter 27, he described about the Jiva in a conditioned state attaining liberation. The next question from Mother Devahuti was around the processes of bhakti in 3.25, and these were addressed. So the third question was addressed essentially in two chapters, 26 and 27. And the fourth question was on the processes of yoga, which we covered in the last two classes, addressed the limbs of Ashtanga Yoga and the descriptions of the Lord's form for dharana and dhyana. Mahesh Prabhu took an excellent lecture, a class on the description of the Lord's form for dharana and dhyana. I would encourage all those devotees who have not yet heard that lecture or seen that lecture to please, take your time to see the lectures. They are all available. Lilananda Prabhu has created the YouTube list, so please access it. It's a beautiful lecture. It helps us also to meditate on the Lord's form through the day. Today we will be focusing on questions number, if you look at it, these questions will be covered. The first 6 verses will cover the questions. Essentially covering, the first question is on the path of bhakti in detail, and this is covered through the chapter around the various classes of bhakti, the characteristics of pure bhakti, the angas of bhakti. So we'll cover today up till the angas of bhakti. We won't cover the dangers of offenses. It will be covered tomorrow. And then the nature of time. So the characteristics of time are also described from verse 38 to 45. And the continual birth of death and death of jivas from 30 to 32. So this is about the different stages of the jiva. So the pains in youth, old age, death, hell of materially attached persons. The pains that a jiva goes through in the womb of the mother as an infant, at birth, as a child. And what are the prayers of the jiva within the womb to the Supreme Lord. And also there is a criticism of sakama karma and the superiority of bhakti yoga. So bhakti yoga is again re-emphasized here as the ultimate destination that we need to strive for. So it's in sequence, as you were saying. So Gauranga Darshan Prabhu, puts it in a very nice way that whatever is there in Bhagavatam is logical. Necessary might not be in a sequential way, but you will see that it comes in a very logical. The flow happens in a very logical way. So we'll now move to starting to read the chapter 29. I will recite the verse, and then I will request Prabhuji or Mataji to read the translation, and then we can go through the purport and we can have a short discussion if needed. Otherwise, we will continue. So texts 1 and 2. Devahuteruvacha lakshanam mahadadinam nam prakrite purushasya cha swarupam lakshyate misham yena tat paramarthikam yatha sankheshu katitam yanmulam tat prachakshate bhakti yogasya me margam bruhi vistarashah prabho. Can someone read the translation?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prasad Prabhuji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Okay, shall I read it, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, please.
Okay, Prabhu, thank you. Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Dehahuti inquired, My dear Lord, you have already very scientifically described the symptoms of total material nature and characteristics of the spirit according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now I shall request you to explain path of devotional service, which is ultimate end of all philosophical systems.
Hare Krishna. So, Prasad Prabhu, just pause, just 1 minute, and then you can read
Sure.
the book. So, it's very interesting out here that, now that he's described yoga, Ashtanga was described. Now, Mother Devoti is coming to the final thing about what is the ultimate, right? It is Bhakti Yoga. To me, the purport always of the first purport of the chapter is usually always very interesting because Prabhupada in that purport, he actually gives a lot of information about the chapter itself. Maybe because he knows that in this Kali Yuga, people might be a bit lazy to, to read through. So they want that instant information on the first page itself. So by the way, in every page of the books that have been written by Srila Prabhupada, we get the essence or we get the key messages and the summary also. So the suspense in a way is actually thrown away by Srila Prabhupada on the first page itself. He kills the suspense. And that is for a reason. So in this first purport itself, you'll get a good understanding of what is there in the chapter. So let's read through this. Prasad Prabhu, I'll request you to read it.
Yes, Prabhu. Okay, purport. In this 29th chapter, the glories of devotional service are elaborately explained, and the influence of time on the conditioned soul is also described. The purpose of elaborately describing the influence of time is to detach the conditioned soul from the material activities, which are considered to be simply a waste of time. In the previous chapter, material nature, the spirit, and the Supreme Lord or the Super Soul are analytically studied. And in this chapter, the principle of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service, the execution of activities in the eternal relationship between the living entities and the personality of Godhead are explained. Shall I continue, Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhu. So just one pause, Prabhu. But actually over here, if you look at it in this chapter, also what will be explained, you'll see is that on one side building devotion, but on the other side, the importance of also detachment is also explained because to build devotion without detachment will not happen. So both are actually kind of two sides of the same coin. So one side is detachment, the other side is attachment to Krishna, and they both go in tandem. Yes, Prabhu, please continue.
Okay, Prabhu. So yellow portion or everything shall I continue, Prabhu?
Let's read this one part fully, Prabhu. You can
Okay,
go through. You can also
sure.
speed up a little bit also.
Yeah. Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the basic principles of all systems of philosophy. All philosophy which does not aim for devotional service to the Lord is considered merely mental speculation. But of course, Bhakti Yoga, with no philosophical basis, is more or less sentiment. There are two classes of men. Some consider themselves intellectually advanced and simply speculate and meditate, and others are sentimental and have no philosophical basis for their propositions. Neither of them can achieve the higher goal of life, or if they do, if it will take them many years. Vedic literature therefore suggests that there are three elements, namely Supreme Lord, the living entity, and their eternal relationship. And that the goal of life is to follow the principles of bhakti or devotion service, and
Ultimately,
ultimately attain the planet of Supreme Lord in full devotion and love as an eternal servitor of Lord.
yes, Prabhu. So again, the three elements are Bhakti, Bhakta, and Bhagwan. So these three elements have to be there always.
Okay, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Sankhya philosophy. Yeah. Sankhya philosophy is analytical study of all existence. One has to understand everything by examining its nature and characteristics. This is called this is called acquirement of knowledge. Okay. But one should not simply acquire knowledge without reaching the goal of life or the basic principles of acquiring knowledge. Bhakti Yoga. If you give up Bhakti Yoga and simply busy ourselves in the analytical study of the nature of things as they are, then the result will be practically nil. It is stated in the Bhagavatam that such engagement is something like husking a paddy. There is no use beating the husk if the grain has already been removed. By the scientific study of the material nature, the living entity and the super soul, one has to understand the basic principle of devotional service to the Lord. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Best example Prabhupada has given. Thank you, Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Yes, Prabhu. Every purport is so detailed, Prabhuji and Mataji's. I think that is where, when we read the purports, you get everything in Prabhupada's purports that are there. But importantly, what he's saying is simply also acquiring just knowledge is not sufficient. You need to know the ultimate purpose for which we acquire knowledge, and that purpose is Bhakti Yoga. Without keeping that goal in mind, everything else that we do is useless. We'll continue. Text 3. Virago yena purusho bhagavan sarvato bhave achakshva jiva lokasya vividha mama samsmritihi. Devahuti continued, "My dear Lord, please also describe in detail, both for me and for people in general, the continual process of birth and death, for by hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world." Hare Krishna. So here we are also seeing the compassion of Mother Devahoti. So it's not just for herself, but she's also asking for the people in general. And she's asking about the continual process of birth and death. And this will get addressed later on in the chapter. For by hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world. Why do we need to become detached? To get attached to that higher purpose, to get attached to Krishna. So it's a short purport. We'll also read this. Anyone wants to read it? Prabhuji and Mataji's?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I read?
Anela Mataji, yes, please.
In this verse, the word samsriti is very important. Shreyastri means the prosperous path of advancement towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And samsriti means the continued journey on the path of birth and death towards the darkest region of material existence. The people who have no knowledge of this material world, God and their actual intimate relationship with Him are actually going to the darkest region of material existence in the name of progress, in the name of material, in the material advancement of civilization. To enter the darkest region of material existence means to enter into a species of life other than the human species. Ignorant men do not know that after this life, they are completely under the grip of material nature and will be offered a life which may not be very congenial. How a living entity gets different kinds of bodies will be explained in the next chapter. This continual change of bodies in birth and death is called samsara. Devahuti requests her glorious son Kapilamuni to explain about this continual journey to impress upon the conditioned souls that they are undergoing a path of degradation by not understanding the path of Bhakti Yoga devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. And yeah, so when I was reading this verse, Prabhuji and Mataji, in fact, yesterday, and I was actually also talking to a colleague of mine in office, and I'm sure all of you have heard of all these advances in today's world of artificial intelligence and AI. And this colleague of mine was telling me about, how AI is going to take over the world. And then eventually maybe we might have AI actually controlling human beings. just imagine what a deplorable day that will be when actually a machine, right, which doesn't have a soul, which has been actually, it's a machine, might control us, and people are actually thinking about that day. They are fearful about it. They are also excited about it. And we need to be so grateful to Prabhupada that he has given us this knowledge, which he talks about here. He says, people who have no knowledge of this material world, God, and their actual intimate relationship with him are actually going to the darkest region of material existence in the name of progress in the material advancement of civilization. In today's world, that is exactly what is happening, because people are forgotten about God, forgotten about Bhagavan, and are so enamored with their own knowledge that they think that they know it all. So when I had actually suggested to him, actually I started in telling him brief. I didn't want to get into. I didn't want to preach to him, but I tried to tell him about the fact that the body and the soul are different, and I tried to explain to him a bit of the SSR classes topics. But his was, yeah, that can also be true, and I hope it is true. But what if AI takes over? So there's that faith isn't there. And we need to be grateful that actually we have got someone like Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya, who's actually guiding us and who's telling us to be very, very careful about such things and not fall in that trap. Next 4. Kalasyeshwara rupasya paresham cha parasyate swarupam bata kurvanti yadheto kushalam jana. Translation: please also describe eternal time, which is a representation of your form, and by whose influence people in general engage in the performance of pious activities. Hare Krishna. Can Prabhuji or Mataji please also, let's go through this purport.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Praveen Prabhu.
Purport. However ignorant one may be regarding the path of good fortune and the path down to the darkest region of ignorance, everyone is aware of the influence of eternal time, which devours all the effects of our material activities. The body is born at a certain time, and immediately the influence of time acts upon it. From the date of the birth of the body, the influence of death is also acting. The advancement of age entails the influence of time on the body. If a man is thirsty or 50 years or 30, sorry, if a man is 30 or 50 years old, then the influence of time has already devoured 30 or 50 years of the duration of his life. Everyone is conscious of the last stage of life when he will meet the cruel hands of death. But some consider their age and circumstances, concern themselves with the influence of time, and thus engage in pious activity so that in the future they will not be put into a low family or an animal species. Generally, pupils are attached to sense enjoyment and so aspire for life on the heavenly planets. Therefore, they engage themselves in charitable or other pious activities. But actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, one cannot get relief from the chain of birth and death, even if he goes to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, because the influence of time is present everywhere. Within this material world, in the spiritual world, however, the time factor has no influence. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Brahma Bhuvanar Loka Punaravatina Arjuna. So no matter from this entire thing right up to Brahmaloka, it's all filled with only material miseries. We'll keep going up and down, and we'll be coming. That is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. And the importance of time, I think this is also being, we are so, Mother Devavati is asking this question so that it will help us build detachment. When Bhishma Dev was on the battlefield, lying on the bed of arrows, Yudhishthir Maharaj, along with Krishna, the Pandava brothers, and a lot of other demigods, sages, and all, they came to see his departure. At that point, when Bhishma Dev speaks to Yudhishthira to encourage him, one of the things he tells is, he asks, he says, why is such a pious person like you, why for people like Mother Kunti are suffering, have gone through so much? Is it because of what? You people are so pious. And he answers that all, he says, it's because of time. So nobody in this material world can escape the clutches of time. When we are in this material world, time, Kala, so Bhagavan in the form of Kala is already acting on us. And he's taking us in a way to that next destination. We need to steer this vehicle. He is observing us and he's already acting on us. Every 7 minutes that we spend, our body is getting regenerated. So I heard somewhere, I'm not able to quote it where I heard it from, but that every 7 minutes, the cells in our body actually they regenerate. They die and then new cells come. The new cells that are coming, the old cells are dying. So that process has already started. And for most of us on this call, we have already spent more than 50% of our lives. Or we have wasted, at least I have wasted so much time. The remaining time that is there, we need to understand that every second ticking, every second going away, every second that we are not remembering Krishna is time that is going wasted. We might not realize this till we face that everyone is conscious of that last stage of life. Till when we come face to face with death, we will not realize it. Then it will be too late because our memories will be taken away, only our desires will remain. And we will take another birth. We'll come back into one more womb and we will suffer again. Next 5. Yes, Satyadev Prabhu.
Prabhuji, one question, I mean,
Yes.
not relevant here, but we heard that Hanuman is going to be the next Brahma, right? Somewhere it was mentioned.
Yeah, Prabhu, tell me.
Yeah, so I mean, Hanuman is a devotee of Lord Ram, but still he was given a position in the material world. I don't know, because just we're reading about all this material world. Even Brahmaloka is also material world. I'm just contemplating that. I mean, how come?
So in fact, in this chapter, Prabhu, there is one section that we will be covering, which is on that the devotees don't desire liberation. They don't desire liberation, Prabhu. They are actually, they want to serve.
Okay.
And from my understanding, and I request other senior devotees to also comment, Hanuman is not here because why he was given the material world because of some other reason. It's because he wants to serve. We'll cover that also, Prabhu, here in this chapter. It will come. There's a verse on which Lord Kapila Muni will specify that devotees don't seek that liberation. Those 5 types of liberation, they don't want that. They want only to serve, and they believe in bhakti. On his elevation to become Brahma, Prabhu, I have also heard it, Prabhu, but I have not read it in any of the scriptures, so I am not able to comment on that.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Lokasya mityabhimater chakshusas chiram prasuptasya tamasya anasraye shantasya karmashva anuvidha yadhya tvam avirashsihisi ila yoga bhaskara. Translation: My dear Lord, you are just like the sun, for you illuminate the darkness of the conditional life of the living entities. Because their eyes of knowledge are not open, they are sleeping eternally in that darkness without your shelter. And therefore, they are falsely engaged by the actions and reactions of the material activities, and they appear to be very fatigued. Purport: It appears that Srimati Devahuti the glorious mother of Lord Kapiladeva is very compassionate for the regrettable condition of people in general, who, not knowing the goal of life, are sleeping in the darkness of illusion. So again, here it's emphasized on Devavati mother's compassion. And I can fully relate with that I am sleeping in the darkness of illusion. And it's only when I get these opportunities, whether it is chanting, and even then also my mind keeps running here and there, or doing reading, or this opportunity to take this class, is when actually I'm getting an opportunity to get out of that slumber. It is the feeling of the Vaishnava or the devotee of the Lord that he should awaken them. Similarly, Devavati is requesting her glorious son to illuminate the lives of the conditioned souls so that their most regrettable conditioned life may be ended. The Lord is described here as Yoga Bhaskara, the son of the system of all yoga. Devavati has already requested her glorious son to describe Bhakti Yoga, and the Lord has described Bhakti Yoga as the ultimate yoga system. Bhakti Yoga is the sun-like illumination for delivering the conditioned souls, whose general condition is described here. They have no eyes to see their own interests. They do not know that the goal of life is to increase the material necessities of existence, because the body will not exist more than a few years. The living beings are eternal, and they have their eternal need. Unfortunately, we have forgotten that eternal. That's the only reason, because we have been covered by layers of material contamination, and we are living in this illuminated world. And the only solution that remains to pull us out of that illusionary world that we are living in is Bhakti Yoga. That's like the sun that will dispel all the darkness. So in the morning when the sun rises, what's the first thing that happens? Darkness gets dispelled. And that is what happens when the sun of Bhakti Yoga will rise in our lives, in our hearts. The darkness of illusion that we are living in will get dispelled. Move to text 6. So I'll complete the purport reading, sorry. If one engages only in caring for the necessities of the body, not caring for the eternal necessities of life, then he is part of civilization whose advancements put the living entities in the darkest region of ignorance. Sleeping in the darkest region, one does not get any refreshment, but rather gradually becomes fatigued. He invents many processes to adjust this fatigued condition, but he fails and thus remains confused. The only path for mitigating his fatigue in the struggle for existence is the path of devotional service or the path of Krishna consciousness. So when we are sleeping in slumber, as Prabhupada says, one does not get any refreshment. There is no energy. And when energy gets sapped, we rely on ChatGPT and AI and all those other tools, and then start believing that AI is going to take over the world. So let's focus on the lotus feet of the Lord, and let's try to progress in our Krishna consciousness journey so that we can come out of this deep slumber that we are all sleeping. Now from text 6 onwards, now we'll see that, Maitreya Muni will first say, Maitreya will say, Maitreya vacha iti matur vacha slakshnam pratinandya mahamunihi avabhase kuru shrestha pritastam karunarditaha. Translation: Sri Maitreya said, O best amongst the Kurus, the great sage Kapila, moved by the great compassion and pleased by the words of his glorious mother, spoke as follows. Does someone want to read the purport?
Yes, ma'am. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna Kanjan Prabhu, Nanot Pranam.
Yeah, purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Lord Kapila was very satisfied by the request of his glorious mother, because she was thinking not only in terms of her personal salvation, but in terms of all fallen conditioned souls. The Lord is always compassionate towards the fallen souls of the material world, and therefore he comes himself or sends his confidential servants to deliver them. Since he is perpetually compassionate towards them, if some of his devotees are also become compassionate towards them, he is very pleased with the devotees. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that persons who are trying to elevate the condition of the fallen soul by preaching the conclusions of Bhagavad Gita, namely full surrender unto the personality of Godhead, are very dear to him. Thus, when the Lord saw that his beloved mother was very compassionate towards the fallen soul, he was pleased and he also became compassionate towards her. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we see one of the symptoms of a devotee, of a pure devotee, is compassion. And that compassion is very, very pleasing for the Lord. He's very pleased when he sees that his devotees are showing compassion towards the fallen souls. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Next, 7. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bhakti Yogo Bahuvidho Margair Bhamini Bhavyate Swabhava Guna Margena Sham Bhavo Vividyate. Translation: Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of the different qualities of the executor. Purport: Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is one because in pure devotional service, there is no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally, people take to devotional service with a purpose. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, people who are not purified to take to devotional service with 4 purposes. So I have a question, Prabhuji and Matajis. Does anybody remember the verse from the Bhagavad Gita? On the why a devotee takes to who's not purified, people who take, why do they take to devotional service? Hare Krishna.
You will the 4 kinds of people are which one, Prabhuji? Who comes to the Lord? Who comes to the Lord? 4 kind of people. That is what you are trying to ask.
Yes, Prabhu. The 4 kinds of pious men. They who are they? What kind of they come to render devotional service to him for what purpose? So the 4 purposes. Why do they come?
Prabhu, that misery or this enjoyment and wealth and Gyani.
Malice. Yeah.
And one more.
Another one is
And who's in search of the knowledge of the absolute. So, verse of 7.16. Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritina arjuna artho jignasur arthati jnani cha bharatarsabha. So, in which he says that people who are distressed, people who are desiring wealth, people who are inquisitive, and those who are in search of the knowledge of the absolute, they come. So here Prabhupada actually elaborates that in a bit more. He says a person who is distressed because of the material conditions becomes a devotee of the Lord and approaches the Lord. Why does he approach? For mitigation of his distress. Then you have a person in need of money approaches the Lord to ask for some improvement in his monetary condition. And then he says others who are not distressed or in need of monetary assistance but are seeking knowledge, these are the inquisitive people, in order to understand the absolute truth, also take to devotional service, but they inquire into the nature of the Supreme Lord. This is very nicely described in 7.16. Actually, the path of devotional service is one without a second. But according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties. So depending on the condition, the devotional service appears in multifarious varieties. This will be nicely explained in the following verses. So what we need to keep in mind is bhakti is always is transcendental. Bhakti can never be impure. But as Prabhupada is saying out here, but according to the devotee's condition. So the devotee's condition can get impacted by the 3 gunas also, which we'll cover here. And according to that, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, 81. So there will be different conditions will be there, that and the devotional service appears in multifarious varieties. And Prabhupada is also saying this will nicely be explained in the following verses. Text 8. Abhisandhaya yo himsam dambham matsaryam eva va samrambhit binna drigbhavam mai kuryat tamasah. Translation: devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is separatist, is considered to be in the mode of darkness. Can someone read the purport, please?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Padmamataji, Dandavatana. Please.
It has already been stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, that the highest, most glorious religion is the attainment of causeless, unmotivated devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the supreme personality of Godhead. That is not actually a motive. That is the pure condition of the living entity. In the conditioned stage, when one engages in devotional service, he should follow the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master in full surrender. The spiritual master is the manifested representation of the Supreme Lord because he receives and presents the instructions of the Lord as they are by disciplic succession. It is described in Bhagavad Gita that the teachings therein should be received by disciplic succession, otherwise there is an adulteration. To act under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master with a motive to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure devotional service. But if one has a motive for personal sense gratification, his devotional service is manifested differently. Such a man may be violent, proud, envious, and angry, and his interests are separate from the Lord's. One who approaches the Supreme Lord to render devotional service, but who is proud of his personality, envious of others, or vengeful, is in the mode of anger. He thinks that he is the best devotee. Devotional service is executed this way is not pure. It is mixed and is of the lowest grade. Tamasaha. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura advises that a Vaishnava who is not of good character should be avoided. A Vaishnava is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life, but if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnava of the first order of good character. One may offer his respects to such a Vaishnava because he has accepted the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of life, but one should not keep company with a Vaishnava who is in the mode of ignorance. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So you become what the company you keep. So the company you keep also ends up defining you. So I was meeting up with an Israeli entrepreneur actually, and he was telling me that every day he meets, his goal is to meet up with 5 entrepreneurs. He likes to meet up. And that keeps him in that mindset to be aggressive and successful as an entrepreneur. That is the Sangha. And here also what we are seeing is that what we need to avoid, because if we don't keep the like-minded company, we will end up suffering. That's a risk. And that's why he's warning us. Prabhupada is warning us. So what should be our only motive in devotional service? Anyone? What should be our only motive in devotional service?
To please
Lord.
Yes.
To serve Lord.
To please the Lord. That's what Prabhupada has said. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That should be our only motive. Text 9. Vishayan abhishansandhaya yasha aishwaryam eva va archadav archayed yomam Pritak bhava sara rajasaha. Translation: the worship of deities in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. I'll read the purport. The word separatist must be understood carefully. The Sanskrit words in this connection are Bhinnadrik and Pritak Bhavaha. A separatist is one who sees his interest as separate from the Supreme Lord. So it's a very important point. Who is that separatist? That separatist is one who sees his interests as different from the Supreme Lord. He might want to merge with that Lord, but his interests are not one with that Lord. Oneness is when we have one interest, but not about oneness is not equality. Here, separatist is one who has separate interests, who has an interest that is separate from the Lord. Mixed devotees or devotees in the mode of passion and ignorance think that the interest of the Supreme Lord is supplying the orders of the devotee. The interest of such devotees is to draw from the Lord as much as possible for their own sense gratification. This is the separatist mentality. Actually, pure devotion is explained in the previous chapter. The mind of the Supreme Lord and the mind of the devotee should be dovetailed. The interests need to be dovetailed. A devotee should not wish anything but to execute the desire of the Supreme. That is oneness. When the devotee has an interest or will different from the interest of the Supreme Lord, his mentality is that of a separatist. So who is the separatist here? The devotee has an interest or will different from the interest of the Supreme Lord. His mentality is that of a separatist. When the so-called devotee desires material enjoyment without reference to the interest of the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become famous or opulent by utilizing the mercy or grace of the Supreme Lord, he is in the mode of passion. Mayavadis, however, interpret this word separatist in a different way. They say that while worshipping the Lord, one should think himself one with the Supreme Lord. This is another adulterated version or form of devotion within the modes of material nature. The conception of the living entity is one with the Supreme is based on the mode of, is in the mode of ignorance. Oneness is actually based on oneness of interest. A pure devotee has no interest but to act on behalf of the Supreme Lord. When one has even a tinge of personal interest, his devotion is mixed with the three modes of material nature. So again here, separatist and oneness, two sides of the same coin. The separatist side, our interest should not be separate from the interest of the Lord. And the oneness is basically oneness with the interest of the Lord. It should not be thinking like a Mayavadi on oneness as oneness is merging with the Lord, that we are equal to the Lord. We can never be equal to the Lord. We are qualitatively one, quantitatively we are not. Text 10. Karmanirharamuddisya dishya parasmin vatad arpanam yajedyashtavyam iti va prithak bhavaha sa satvikaha. When a devotee worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offers the results of his activities in order to free himself from the inabilities of his fruitive activities, his devotion is in the mode of goodness. Purport. Can someone read the purport, please? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Purport. The Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudras, along with the Brahmacharis, Grastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasis, are the members of the 8 division of Varnasa and Ashramas, and they have their respective duties to perform for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When such activities are performed and the results are offered to the Supreme Lord, they arrange I know, Prabhuji, what is this?
They are arranged. They
Okay.
are Sama block, Prabhu. Please
Karmarpana.
Karmarpana.
Karpanya duties performed for the satisfaction of the Lord. If there is any inverity or fault, it is atoned for by this offering process. But if this offering process is in the mode of goodness rather than in pure devotion, then the interest is different. The four ashramas and the four varnas acts for some benefits in accordance with their personal interests. Therefore, such activities are in the mode of goodness. They cannot be counted in the categories of pure devotional. Pure devotional service, the service as described by Rupa Goswami, is free from all material desires. Anya vilasita sunyam. There can be no excuse for personal or material interest. Devotional activities should be transcendental to fruitive activities and empiric philosophical speculation. Pure devotional service is transcendental to all material qualities. Devotional service is in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness can be divided into 81 categories. There are different devotional activities such as hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, offering prayers, rendering service, and surrendering. Everything and each of them can be divided into three qualitative categories. There is hearing in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, and in the mode of goodness. Similarly, there is chanting in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness, etc. 3 multiplied by 9 equals 27, and when again multiplied by 3, it becomes 81. One has to transcend all such mixed materialistic devotional service in order to reach the standard of pure devotional service, as explained in the next verse. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So all the 9 limbs of bhakti, they will be multiplied by 3, the 3 times modes, and each 3 of the modes actually can multiply, have again interactions with each other. So you can have Rajas Sattva, Rajas Tamas. Similarly, Sattva Sattva, Sattva Rajas, Sattva Tamas. Like that, you'll have 9. So 3 times 3. So 9 times 3 times 3. That is the 81 different varieties, what we discussed earlier, are there, and we could take any of that. And so what we are seeing here in this particular verse is that, I wanted to ask one question is that, are we in Krishna consciousness for liberation? Or are we in Krishna consciousness for something? And I was reflecting on this because we keep also saying this, and it's something that came to my mind when I was reading this, was that we keep saying that, maybe not get out of the cycle of birth and death.
We want to be in the service of Lord Prabhuji in
Yes.
any situation.
But why do we say we want to get out of the cycle of birth and death? So I'm just asking this question. It's something that came to my attention also when I was reading this purport also, wherein Prabhupada is saying that, that even in that mode of goodness also, if we are offering something or if we are praying for something with a self-interest, right, then that is still not yet pure devotion. Pure devotion is anya vilashita shonyam jnana karmadhyana vritam anukulena krishnanu shilanam iti bhakti uttama. So it has to be devoid of any desire. It has to be devoid of any desire. And we will gradually progress. That is what also Gauranga Darshan Prabhu in his class he was mentioning, that it's not that you don't make that progress, you do progress. But it's a step by step, it will happen. So, and we need to continue to persist. And it will take some time, and at least that is my reflection in this. When I read this verse, was that it will take time to get there. But we need to be persistent and we need to be disciplined in that entire process that, Srila Prabhupada has given us. We'll continue. the text 11 to 12, 11 and 12. These are important verses out here. Madguna Shruti Matrena Mahi Sarva Guhashaye Manogatir Avichinna Yatha Gangam Vaso Ambudhao Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya Nirgunasya Hya Udharitam Ahaituki Avyavahita Ya Bhakti Purushottame. Translation: the manifestation of unadulterated devotional service is exhibited when one's mind is at once attracted to hearing the transcendental name and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is residing in everyone's heart. Just as the water of the Ganges flows naturally down towards the ocean, such devotional ecstasy, uninterrupted by any material condition, flows towards the Supreme Lord. Purport: the basic principle of this unadulterated pure devotional service is love of Godhead. Matguna Shruti Matrena means just after hearing about the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, these qualities are called Nirguna. The Supreme Lord is uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he is attractive to the pure devotees. There is no need to practice meditation to attain such attraction. The pure devotee is already in the transcendental stage, and the affinity between him and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is natural and is compared to the Ganges water flowing towards the sea. The flow of the Ganges water cannot be stopped by any condition. Similarly, a pure devotee's attraction for the transcendental name, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Godhead cannot be stopped by any material condition. The word avichinna is without interruptions. It is very important in the connection. No material condition can stop the flow of the devotional service of a pure devotee. The word ahetuki means without reason. A pure devotee does not render loving service to the personality of Godhead for any cause or any benefit, material or spiritual. This is the first symptom of unalloyed devotion. Anya bilashita shunyam. He has no desire to fulfill by rendering devotional service. That is devoid of all material desires. Such devotional service is meant for the Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and not for anyone else. Sometimes pseudo-devotees show devotion to many demigods, thinking the forms of the demigods to be the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead's form. It is specifically mentioned herein, however, that bhakti devotional service is meant only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, Vishnu, or Krishna, not for anyone else. Avyavahita means without cessation. A pure devotee must engage in the service of the Lord 24 hours a day. Without cessation, his life is so molded that at every minute and every second, he engages in some sort of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another meaning of the word avyavahita is that the interest of the devotee and the interest of the Supreme Lord are on the same level. The devotee has no interest but to fulfill the transcendental desire of the Supreme Lord. Such spontaneous service unto the Supreme Lord is transcendental and is never contaminated by the material modes of nature. These are the symptoms of pure devotional service, which is free from all contamination of material nature. Hare Krishna. Can somebody tell me about the we have also read one verse earlier in the Bhagavatam. It's there in the first chapter, which talks about devotional service being ahaituki apratihata. Anyone?
Savai Pumsam Paradhar.
Yes. So it's there in yeah, sorry, I'm trying. Yeah. Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhakti Radhokshage Ahaituki Apratihata Yayatma Suprasidati. The supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. How do we keep our devotional service ahetuki apratihata yati hata, uninterrupted and unmotivated. Unmotivated seems doable. How do we do it uninterrupted? In our today's world, how can we do that? Anyone has any thoughts?
By association, Prabhuji. Through
Yeah,
association.
so Akinjan Prabhu, do we need to have this devotional service? Does it? How do we? Prabhupada says here 24/7 every second of his life. How do we manage that?
Okay, 24 by that is only possible by just hearing and chanting, Prabhuji. Hearing and chanting. So the association and hearing is the key things.
But Prabhu, we are grihasthas, and we are in a varnashrama,
Right.
and we have to also execute those duties also. So how do we ensure that we are doing that? Yes, we should spend time, and we spend time on sadhana. 3 to 4
Keeping
hours of time.
Krishna in center
Yes,
for all Krishna in center for all activities.
Yeah, keeping Krishna in center, and also Prabhupada is saying, think about it as the devotee has no interest but to fulfill the transcendental desire of the Supreme Lord, and you need to keep the interest of Krishna. That is, another meaning of the word avyavahita is that the interest of the devotee and the interest of the Supreme Lord are on the same level. So ensuring that when we are doing tasks, and this is where that consciousness, we might be stuck, we might get into that, the usual routine, and I get into it. The moment I'm done with my chanting, I'm finished my morning sadhana, then after that, I'm into my usual routine. I'm not thinking actually whether I have centered Krishna there. What I'm doing is there. But then I reflected about it, and I think maybe something, and this is my own personal reflection, was that maybe it would be helpful for us to plan our lives, plan our activities, such that they seem to be leading to that ultimate goal. They dovetail with our ultimate goal, which is to serve Krishna. So, and maybe that is one approach. I might be wrong here again also, but because and I will request other senior devotees to comment. But to me, centering Krishna in our lives and whatever we are doing as part of our lives. So, and especially during our work, how do we do that? I think that is important. I was here in Singapore. We were part of one more Bhakti Riksha group out here, and there the leader is a disciple of Prabhupada Swan Maharaj. And Maharaj actually organizes sessions with the group, and I am also invited for it. So I go and take that opportunity to get that association. And in one of the sessions, I asked Maharaj that, how do we ensure that at work we can constantly be thinking about Krishna? Because we do our sadhana and then I get caught up in that rigmarole of life. I don't know if any of you also associate yourself with that kind of a sensation or feeling, but I have that. And he said, and he was first very blunt. He was actually quite blunt, and he said that that can also be an excuse, but you can, in terms of when you are at work, you can bring in that consciousness. And he allowed me to reflect on it, and of course, and the more I'm reflecting about it, I'm getting some ideas, and I would encourage all of you also to think about how could you bring Krishna into your lives 24/7. So that how can we, even what can we do before we go to bed, so that those 6 hours or 7 hours of sleep that we are sleeping and we go into a dream state, which is also ignorance, how can we ensure that maybe we are getting in Krishna consciousness into that state of that 6 hours of sleep? We are addressing that 4 hours of sadhana that we might do in a day, and the rest of the time, sometime when we are eating, maybe we are remembering Bhagwan. The rest of the time, what should we do? What could we do? That can help us. Please reflect on that.
Prabhuji,
Yes, Mataji.
see, while doing any work, for example, we start cooking in the morning. we should think that we are cooking for Krishna. And even for everybody we serve, Paramatma is there in everybody and we are serving him. Like that we can think. And we are giving bath to our children. We have to think that we are giving bath to Krishna, who is inside that child or something like that. So in every walks of life, we have to think, we can think of Krishna, that he's for him we are doing. It is his for his service. Like that we can think, so that even while doing, we do it with most of much love and everything, with good consciousness also we can do that every
Right.
time.
Absolutely right, Mataji, and thanks for sharing those very valuable insights. I think it will be useful for everybody. We all try to do that. So when it comes to cooking, sometimes, I'm thinking about what I like. And then I remember Krishna. But sometimes, menu like today we are trying to decide, and I was telling Mataji that we'll make pizza. So that was coming maybe out of my own desire. I'm not asking whether is this what Krishna likes. So, but it is difficult. But again, thank you, Mataji, for sharing that. I think we need to train ourselves to make it a habit. As Mahesh Prabhu was telling in the last lecture, that once you start repeating it, to make it a habit, you need to do a few things a few number of times. I don't know how many times he mentioned it, but it was 21 or what, I don't know. You do that, and then after the 22nd day or whatever, it will become a kind of a practice. So maybe that is something also that we could try. I'll continue, Mataji. Now I'll continue with text 13. Salokya sarishti samipya sarupyaikatvam apyuta Diyamanam na grihananti vinamat sevanam jana. Translation: a pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation. Salokya, sarishti, samipya, sarupya, or ekatva, even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is referring to your question, Satyadev Prabhu. Purport: Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to execute pure devotional service out of spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Sikshashtaka, he says, he prays to the Lord, Na dhanam na janam na sundaram kavitam va jagadisha kame mama janmani janmanishware bhavata bhakti raheti. So he says that all I want from you is that in life after life, I may remain a pure devotee at your lotus feet. I do not want na dhanam na janam. I don't want wealth. I don't want another life. I don't want a beautiful wife. Nor do I wish have any followers. I want uninterrupted devotional service to you. All I want is that. There is a similarity between the prayers of Lord Chaitanya and the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya prays in life after life, indicating that a devotee does not even desire the cessation of birth and death. Prabhu, the question that you are asking, a pure devotee does not even desire the cessation of birth and death. The yogis and empiric philosophers desire cessation of the process of birth and death, but a devotee is satisfied even to remain in this material world and execute devotional service. It is clearly stated herein that a pure devotee does not desire ekatva or oneness with the Supreme Lord, as desired by the impersonalists. The mental speculators and the mediators to become one with the Supreme Lord is beyond the dream of a pure devotee. Sometimes he may accept promotion to the Vaikuntha planets to serve the Lord, but he will never accept merging into Brahman effulgence, while he considers worse than hellish. So he might appear the Chaturbhuja form there, he might be bluish in color, might have Shankagada Chakra and the Padma, he might have that, but still the intention is only to please the Lord and to serve. He does not have any other intention or motive. Such ekatva, merging into the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, is called Kaivalya, but the happiness derived from Kaivalya is considered by the pure devotee to be hellish. That's why he doesn't want to merge it. The devotee is so fond of remembering service, rendering service to the Supreme Lord, that these 5 kinds of liberation are not important to him. If one is engaged in pure transcendental loving service to the Lord, it is understood that he has already achieved the 5 kinds of liberation. All we need to do is tender that transcendental, pure, loving, devotional service to the Lord. When a devotee is promoted to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, he receives 4 kinds of facilities. One of these is Salokya, living on the same planet as the Supreme Personality. The Supreme Person, in his different plenary expansions, lives on innumerable Vaikuntha planets. The chief planet is Krishna Loka. Just as within the material universe, the chief planet is the sun, in the spiritual world, the chief planet is Krishna Loka. From Krishna Loka, the bodily effulgence of Lord Krishna is distributed not only to the spiritual world, but to the material world as well. It is covered by matter. However, in the material world, in the spiritual world, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and on each one, the Lord is the predominating deity. A devotee can be promoted to one such Vaikuntha planet to live with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Sarishti, liberation, Sarshti, in liberation, the opulence of the devotee is equal to the opulence of the Supreme Lord. Samipya means to be a personal associate of the Supreme Lord, and in Sarupya, liberation, the bodily features of the devotee are exactly like those of the Supreme Person. But for 2 or 3 symptoms found exclusively on the transcendental body of Lord, what is that? Like, for example, the Srivatsa, the hair on the chest of the Lord, particularly distinguishes him from his devotees. A pure devotee does not accept these 5 kinds of spiritual existence, even if they are offered, and he certainly does not hanker after material benefits, which are all insignificant in comparison with the spiritual benefits. When Prahlad Maharaja was offered some material benefit, he stated, "My Lord, I have seen that my father has achieved all kinds of material benefits, and even the demigods were afraid of his opulence. But still, in a second, you have finished his life, all his material prosperity." For a devotee, there is no question of desiring any material or spiritual prosperity. He simply aspires to serve the Lord. Single-minded focus. That is the highest happiness. So, when we ask for relief from the cycle of birth and death, are we being self-centered? What do you think? I know we have covered this, but is it being self-centered when we are asking for relief from the cycle of birth and death?
Yeah, it is self-centered. It is we are desiring for ourselves. It is not, as you said, it's not aprehata ahetuki and all.
Yes, Prabhu. So after reading this purport also, even I was feeling in the same way, and I'm going to ask Lilananda Prabhu also this question, that, are we being self-centered when we are asking for relief from the cycle of birth and death? Even when we are wishing on birthdays also, we say that we never take birth again. So I hope the meaning of that is, may we never take birth again with that kind of a consciousness. Taking birth again is okay, but maybe with a pure consciousness to serve the Lord and his devotees. That is what we should aspire for, but we'll clarify this with senior devotees. Continue because we need to complete another 6 more verses. Next 14. Sa eva bhakti yogakhya atyantika udarita yenati vrajaya trigunam madbhav bhavayu papadyate. Translation: by attaining the highest platform of devotional service, as I have explained, one can overcome the influence of the 3 modes of material nature and be situated in the transcendental stage as is the Lord. So going above the 3 modes. Purport: Sripad Shankaracharya, who is supposed to be the leader of the imperialist school of philosophers, has admitted in the beginning of his comments on Bhagavad Gita that Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation. Except for him, everything is within this material creation. It is also confirmed in the Vedic literature that before the creation, there was only Narayana, neither Lord Brahma nor Lord Shiva existed. Only Narayana, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna, is always in the transcendental position beyond the influence of material creation. The material qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance cannot affect the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is called Nirguna, free from all tinges of material qualities. Here, The same fact is confirmed by Lord Kapila. One who is situated in pure devotional service is transcendentally situated, as is the Lord. Just as the Lord is unaffected by the influence of the material modes, so too are his pure devotees. One who is not affected by the three modes of material nature is called a liberated soul or a Brahma Bhuta. We have the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashochati Nakanchati. Aham Brahmasmi, I am not this body. This is applicable only to the person who constantly engages in the devotional service of Krishna and is thus in the transcendental stage. He is above influence of the three modes of material nature. It is a misconception of the impersonalists that one can worship any imaginary form of the Lord or Brahman and in the end merge in the Brahman effulgence. Of course, to merge into the bodily effulgence of the Brahman of the Supreme Lord is also liberation, as explained in the previous verse. Tattva is also liberation, but that sort of liberation is never accepted by any devotee. For qualitative oneness is immediately attained as soon as one is situated in devotional service. For a devotee, that qualitative quantity, which is the result of impersonal liberation, is already attained. He does not have to try for it separately. It is clearly stated here that simply by pure devotional service, one becomes qualitatively as good as the Lord himself. So, devotees seek only qualitative oneness, but that qualitative oneness is attained the moment you enter into or you're situated in devotional service. So they are beyond that, they don't hanker because they know that they are already there. So the other thing is that the highest state of existence is called bhakti. And this by which what happens? One surpasses the three gunas. Okay, but that is a byproduct only. The other one is, and the person gets situated in the transcendental stage like the Lord, or attains prema to the Lord. We'll move to text 15. Nishevitena nimittena swadharmena mahiyasa kriyayogena shastena natim srena nityasha. A devotee must execute his prescribed duties, which are glorious, without material profit. Without excessive violence, one should regularly perform one's devotional duties. So in this verse, you see the word nathim srena, that is with minimum violence or sacrifice of life. Prabhuji and Mataji, what is your understanding that a devotee must execute his prescribed duties, which are glorious, without material profit, without excessive violence? One should regularly perform one's devotional duties. So what is your understanding of this, which is without minimum violence?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
So in my understanding, there is a word called aparigraha Prabhu. Aparigraha in Sanskrit. Aparigraha means you take only what is the minimum required, okay, for living. Correct. From the nature. Okay. So whatever you're taking, whatever I'm consuming, okay, today I'm consuming air cooler, okay, is that required? Is the 10 minutes is sufficient, or 5 minutes sufficient, or 2 hours sufficient? Decide. Okay. So for to wake up early morning and use accordingly. For example, I just picked up an example, bro, using a cooler, air cooler. So, and if that is the case, if that conscious is there, then maybe we are towards less violence. We are using very less in that way, Prabhu. That is my understanding, Prabhu.
Yes. So living within our quota, Prabhu. That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. But violence over here, and in this purport, I'm not going to any entire purport over here, but Prabhupada, you should read it, wherein he's talking about here in this particular paragraph over here. He says, even if a devotee has to commit violence, it should be done, not to be done beyond what is necessary. Sometimes the question is put before us. You ask us not to eat meat, but you are eating vegetables. do you think that that is non-violence? That is not violence? The answer is that eating vegetables is also violence. And vegetarians are also committing violence against another living entity, because vegetables also have life. Non-devotees are killing cows, goats, and so many other animals for eating purposes. And a devotee who's vegetarian is also killing. But here, significantly, it is stated that every living entity has to live by killing another entity. That's the law of nature. Jivo jivasya jivanam. One living entity is the life of another living entity. But for a human being, that violence should be committed only as much as necessary, Prabhu, as what you have mentioned. So he says that a human being is not to eat anything which is not offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is the most important point here. He's saying, Yagna Shishtar Sheena Santaha. One becomes free from all sinful reactions by eating foodstuffs which are offered to Yagna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why a devotee should only eat prasada, or foodstuffs which have been offered to the Supreme Lord. And Krishna says that when a devotee offers him foodstuffs from the vegetable kingdom with devotion, he eats that. A devotee is to offer Krishna foodstuffs prepared from vegetables. If the Supreme Lord wants foodstuffs prepared from animal food, the devotee could offer this, but he does not order to do that. So nowhere in the scriptures it is mentioned that we should be offering something to the Supreme Lord, which is of meat or something, that kind of a product. And and a lot of Prabhujis and Matajis are attending this particular course. It's called Vaishnava. I don't know if you can see the book, but it's a manual on Vaishnava etiquette. It is published by the Radha Gopinath Mandir. And in this, all the whatever are the etiquettes that we need to follow, like offering prasad, how to honor prasad, everything is provided. So please refer to that. And there were a lot of interesting things that I wasn't aware of when I was listening to the course, Vaishnav Sadachar course. I think a 600 rupee course only. It's available on the Vidyapit website. You can go and join that. Please do that also if you have the time. Continue with the 16th verse. Madhishnya darshana sparsha puja stutya abhivandane bhuteshu madbhavanaya satvena sangamena cha. The devotee should regularly see my statues in temple, touch my lotus feet, and offer worshipable paraphernalia and prayer. He should see in the spirit of renunciation from the mode of goodness and see every living entity as spiritual. So this is about worshipping. Temple worship is one of them. So amongst all the duties that a devotee has, and it's important that this is again prescribed here in terms of what we need to do for the purification of one's mind, which is what are the components, what are the different angas of bhakti. We started from executing the prescribed duties without material profit, without material desire. That is the Swadharma in verse number 15. And then we moved on to hearing about regularly performing one's devotional activities without excessive violence. That is like, honoring prasada. In this verse, we are talking about another anga of bhakti, which is for the purification of the mind, which is seeing, touching, worshipping, praying, and offering obeisances to the deity. And seeing with detachment and with patience every living entity as spiritual. That is another important thing. You should see in the spirit of renunciation from the mode of goodness and see every living entity as spiritual. And that will translate into the next sloka when we come to which is the qualities of the Madhyamadhikari. But over here, I will read the highlighted section. A neophyte considers the Archa Vigraha, the statue of the Lord, to be different from the original personality of Godhead. He considers it a representation of the Supreme Lord in the form of a deity. But an advanced devotee accepts the deity in the temple as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the difference. So what do we do when we see in our altars also we have the deities, we have images of the deity. Do we see him as a Supreme Personality of Godhead? And do we treat him like that? Are we always conscious of that? how conscious. And so every moment of our lives when we are staying in our house, actually, the God is also there in the altar. Are we remembering that? He's already there. He's already inside you. But again, this is what he says, that a neophyte considers his approach is a bit different from that of how an advanced devotee accepts. Because every living entity originally has a relationship with the Lord as part and parcel, a devotee should try to see all living entities on the same equal level of spiritual existence. Also, so Pandita Samadarshana. So he sees a Shudra, a Brahmana, a hog, a dog, a cow equally. And Prabhupada also goes on to say that simply because a tiger is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord does not mean that we go and embrace him because of a spiritual relationship with the Supreme Lord. We must associate only with persons who have developed Krishna consciousness. Okay, he's hammering that point again about that we need to associate with the right people. Just because we think that a tiger is qualitative, learn, don't get, embrace. But that's also that, we have many tigers sitting around us, right? We need to know which tiger is a domesticated tiger that we can also touch, also even think about even talking to, or forget associating with. So in today's material world, we have to be quite wary about this. So the safest place is, of course, to come to ISKCON and stay in association with the Satsanga. When I read that message that came about yesterday or day before yesterday, somebody had forwarded in our group about some people who are impersonating ISKCON devotees. Right, so that's where we need to be ultra careful also, Prabhujis and Matajis. Text 17. Mahatam bahumanena dinanam anukampaya maitrya jaivatma tulyeshu yamena niyamena cha. Translation. The pure devotee should execute devotional service by giving the greatest respect to the spiritual master and the acharyas. He should be compassionate to the poor and make friendship with persons who are his equals. Again, about association. But all his activities should be executed under regulation and with control of senses. Yama and niyama. So, here, it is also describing about the qualities of the Madhyamadhikari. So the Madhyamadhikari is described in Srimad Bhagavatam in 11.2.46 in this way. Ishvare tad adhineshu pali sheshu dvishatsu cha prema maitri kripopeksha ya karoti sa madhyama. The Madhyamadhikari is a devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the highest object of love, makes friends with the Lord's devotees, is merciful to the ignorant, and avoids those who are envious by nature. So I'll just read the highlighted sections out here. To think of the Vaishnavas, the devotees, as belonging to a particular caste or community, and to think of the acharyas as ordinary men, or to think of the deity in the temple as being made of stone, wood, or metal, is condemned. Niyamena, one should offer the greatest respect to the acharyas according to the standard regulations. A devotee should also be compassionate to the poor. This does not refer to those who are poverty-stricken, but this refers materially. According to the devotional vision, a man is poor if he is not Krishna conscious. That's another important point that is being emphasized by Prabhupada here, that it's not about those who are materially poor. It's those who are spiritually poor, right? That's where we need to be showing compassion. We'll continue with verse 18. Adhyatmikanu Shravanaan Nama Sankirtanachame Nachame Arjavenarya Sangena Nirahankriya Tatha. A devotee should always try to hear about spiritual matters and should always utilize his time in chanting the holy name of the Lord. His behavior should be straightforward and simple. And although he is not envious but friendly to everyone, he should avoid the company of persons who are not spiritually advanced. This is about how a devotee needs to utilize his time. How should he behave and whom he should associate with. And how should you behave? It's emphasized is that's the attitude that we all must have. And out here in this purport also Prabhupada re-emphasizes that. We continue. Madharmano gunair etai parisamshuddha shuddha ashayah purushasyan anja sabhyeti shrutamatra gunam himam. When one is fully qualified with all these transcendental attributes and his consciousness is thus completely purified, he is immediately attracted simply by hearing my name or hearing my transcendental quality. In the beginning of this instruction, the Lord has explained to his mother that Madguna Shruti Matrena, simply by hearing the name, quality, form, etc. of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is immediately attracted. A person becomes fully qualified with all transcendental qualities by following the rules and regulations as recommended in the different scriptures. He's giving you the pathway, the process to become fully qualified. We have developed certain unnecessary qualities by material association. And by following the above process, we become free from that contamination. To develop transcendental qualities, as explained above in the previous verse, one must become free from these contaminated qualities. So that's the first prerequisite. To develop transcendental qualities, you need to become free from contamination. And that's where this whole detachment process starts. Last verse for today. Yathavata ratho grihanam pranagranam avrinte kandha ashayat evam yogaratam cheta atmanam avikariyat. As the chariot of air carries an aroma from its source and immediately catches the sense of smell, similarly, one who constantly engages in devotional service in Krishna consciousness can catch the Supreme Soul, who is equally present everywhere. This is a beautiful verse. Krishna is present everywhere. It's just that we don't see him. We don't see him as we are not saturated with devotion. Prabhupada says, as a breeze carrying a pleasant fragrance from a garden of flowers at once captures the organ of smell, so one's consciousness saturated with devotion can at once capture the transcendental existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who in his Paramatma feature is present everywhere, even in the heart of every living being. So we need to develop that devotional service, and our hearts should be overflowing with that bhakti. That is saturation. It should be overflowing, and when it is saturated, we will be also in a position to see Krishna everywhere. So with that, I will take a pause over here, Prabhuji and Mataji. I'll do a quick recap of what we have covered today. So we started with the questions of Mother Devoti. So essentially, out of the 7 questions, 5, 6, and 7 are asked here in this particular chapter about the path of bhakti in detail. She has asked Kapila Muni to explain, Lord Kapila to explain about the nature of time, and then some samsriti, or birth and death of the jivas. Then Devoti goes on to glorify Lord Kapila. She says that you are Yoga Bhaskara and you give illumination to those who are deluded by falsehood, who are living in this illusory world, who are blind, who are not able to sleep, who are sleeping in samsara, who are fatigued due to attachment. And pleased with Mother Devoti's words, Lord Kapila responds with compassion. We learn that he's very pleased when he sees that his devotees are compassionate towards others. He is even more pleased then. From verse 8 to 10, we see about the performers of bhakti who are in the three modes. So these three modes are ignorance, that is tamasic, passion, rajasic, and goodness. And each of these modes are also described in a bit more detail, where in ignorance is there the intention of the performer is violence, pride, and hatred. There is no compassion. In the mode of passion, the performer is desiring enjoyment, fame, and opulence. And in the mode of goodness, the performer is offering karmaphala and desires liberation. So 3 times 9 makes 81. So there would be 81 different manifestations. So bhakti is always pure. It is just that the performer of bhakti is in these 3 modes. That is why bhakti gets a different flavor. Pure bhakti is beyond the modes of these 3 modes. And we read these 2 important shlokas that were there. And from that verse 11 to 13, the characteristics of pure bhakti are described. We learned about that. The first one was the devotee rejects liberation without seva. Here I would encourage you to go and read in the Subodhini or the third canto. At the end, the special verses. This particular verse is covered in detail by Gauranga Darshan Prabhu. It's a very nice read. Please read that if you get the time. Devotees reject liberation without seva. In 14, we read about bhakti. By bhakti, one surpasses the gunas, the 3 gunas, and there attains bhakti. Then we went and read about the different angas of bhakti. So one was swadharma. Then we read about the devotional acts without violence, like eating prasada. And then we read about deity worship and detached and spiritual vision, that we need to be detached, become free from contamination, and hence be detached. In verse number 17, the qualities of a Madhyamadhikari were described. And those include respect, compassion, friendship, and regulation. And continuing on with the angas of bhakti, we also heard that the devotee, what all is happening, what he does is to develop these transcendental qualities. You need to be free from contamination. But before that, we also read about how a devotee should utilize his time in verse number 18. And what should he do? He should hear, he should chant. How should he behave? He should be simple. Who we should associate with, right? And there should be no false ego. And then in verse number 19, we spoke about you can become purified by these angas of bhakti. And the mind is attracted simply by Shravanam. So whenever you're doing Shravanam itself, that itself is going to be the biggest attraction, and it's going to start purifying. The last beautiful verse we read today was in verse 20, like comparing when does one see Krishna? It was compared to as the air carries the aroma from its source, bhakti carries one's mind to the Lord. But that will happen when our hearts are saturated with devotion. So with that, we can conclude the chapter for today. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I'm happy to take any questions. Please forgive me if I have committed any offense or I've offended any of you. Please forgive me for that. That's because of my ignorance. And thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to read the Bhagavatam and share my reflections, and also listen more to your most valuable reflections that you have shared today. Any thoughts, comments, questions, Matajis and Prabhujis, please feel free to ask. We can take a few questions and then we can close.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the class. Wonderful class. And you explained it so well. So well. And you put in your personal experiences in all this, which was really nice. I mean, you talked about that entrepreneur from Israel. All these are personal experiences, right? These are realizations, and that you have expressed in the class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu. So when I'm speaking also, I think Lord is helping me. It's His mercy with Him. I was able to speak and recollect those experiences. That's also one of the reasons I decided that I'll only do 20 verses, Prabhu. so that, at least we can have a discussion. Otherwise, we're trying to cover a chapter. Sometimes we miss these nice insights and reflections from the devotees also. There were so many nice reflections you have shared, Praveen Prabhu shared, Satyadevta Prabhu asked a wonderful question. Padma Mataji shared some very nice reflections also. So thank you so much, Prabhu. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, wonderful class. Prabhuji, one basic question. I missed that one. Prabhuji, can you just explain what is Sankhya Yoga? What is that analytical study, Prabhuji? A little bit, just idea on this one, Prabhuji.
So Sankhya Yoga it includes all the limbs of yoga and all are explained, but the ultimate goal of Sankhya Yoga is bhakti. So that is what we read and understand in the third canto, Prabhuji. So let me stop sharing. Yeah. So I'm not able to give you a specific exact answer on what is Sankhya Yoga, but Sankhya Yoga is described by Kapila Muni, by Lord Kapila, as one of the questions from Mother Devahuti in the third canto. And that includes, as part of that, he describes all the limbs of yoga, and he also describes Bhakti Yoga, which is the purpose of Sankhya Yoga. So the purpose of Sankhya Yoga is not just to gain liberation, but the purpose of Sankhya Yoga is for us to get that detachment so that we can also build that attachment and get to Bhakti Yoga, which is the most important part of Sankhya Yoga. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I will also request there are other senior devotees also, Santosh Aditya Prabhu and Sri Gopal Prabhu are there. Please, any thoughts on your side, Prabhu? Hare Krishna. Anybody else?
No problem. Thanks, Prabhuji. It's in third canto only, Prabhuji. The same chapter, previous chapter.
Yes, Prabhu. Third canto covers extensively. It covers this, Prabhu.
Okay,
So in fact, in 28th chapter, we covered a lot of it also, Prabhu, in the previous chapter.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions, Prabhujis and Matajis? If there are no more questions, then we can conclude the class. Sri Gopal Prabhu, we can conclude the class. Thank you very much. Panchakalpatarubhyascha.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhujis and Macharis. Dandavat. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Sri Gopal Prabhu, what do I do for that recording? Do I need to stop recording?
Yeah, you can stop recording, Prabhuji.
Okay. I've stopped the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.